أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم صلاة والسلام عليك يا رسول الله وعلى آلك وصحابك يا حبيب الله صلاة والسلام عليك يا سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آلك وصحابك يا خاتم الأنبياء والمرسلين السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته to all the Muslims and prayers of guidance for non-believers.
Today I am here to discuss about the actions taken by the French government against the Muslim community living in France, and we are going to see those actions in the light of famous definitions of terrorism by different international organizations. This presentation will contain definitions of terrorism, some types of terrorism, and current actions of French government. Terrorism. The UN General Assembly Resolution 49-60 adopted on December 9, 1994, titled as Measures to Eliminate International Terrorism, contains a provision describing terrorism as criminal acts intended or calculated to provoke a state of terror in the general public, a group of persons or particular persons for political purposes or in any circumstances unjustifiable, whatever the considerations of a political, philosophical, ideological, racial, ethnic, religious, or any other nature that may be invoked to justify them. The Arab Convention for Suppression of Terrorism was adopted by the Council of Arab Ministers of the Interior and the Council of Arab Ministers of Justice in Cairo, Egypt in 1998. Terrorism was defined in the convention as any act or threat of violence, whatever its motives or purposes, that occurs in the advancement of an individual or collective criminal agenda and seeking to sow panic among people, causing fear by harming them or placing their lives, liberty or security in danger, or seeking to cause damage to the environment or to public or private installation or property, or occupying or seizing them, or seeking to jeopardize national resources. The UN Security Council Resolution 1566/2004 gives a definition: criminal acts including against civilians committed with the intent to cause death or serious bodily injury or taking of hostages with the purpose to provoke a state of terror in the general public or in a group of persons or particular persons, intimidate a population, compel a government or an organization to do or to abstain from doing any act. A UN panel on March 17, 2005 described terrorism as any act intended to cause death or serious bodily harm to civilian or non-combatant with the purpose of intimidating a population or compelling a government or an international organization to do or abstain from doing any act. The European Union defines terrorism for legal official purposes in Act 1 of the Framework Decision on Combating Terrorism 2002. This provides the terrorist offences are certain criminal offences set out in a list comprised largely of serious offences against persons and property which, give their nature or context, may seriously damage a country or an international organization, were committed with the aim of seriously intimidating a population or unduly compelling a government or international organization to perform or abstain from performing any act, destabilizing or destroying the fundamental political, constitutional, economic or social structure of a country or an organization. The United Kingdom Terrorism Act 2000 defines terrorism to include an act designed seriously to interfere with or seriously to disrupt electronic system. An act of violence is not even necessary under this definition. Department of Defense Dictionary of Military Terms defines terrorism as the calculated use of unlawful violence and threat of unlawful violence to inculcate fear intended to coerce or to intimidate government or societies in the pursuit of goals that are generally political, religious or ideological. The United States has defined terrorism under the Federal Criminal Code. Title 18 of the United States Code defines terrorism and lists the crimes associated with terrorism. In Section 2331 of Chapter 113B defines terrorism as activities that involve violent or life-threatening acts that are a violation of the criminal laws of United States or of any state and appears to be intended to intimidate or coerce a civilian population, to influence the policy of a government by intimidating or coercion, or to affect the conduct of a government by mass destruction, assassination, or kidnapping, and occurs primarily within the territorial jurisdiction of the United States. FBI definition of terrorism is the unlawful use of force and violence against persons or property to intimidate or coerce a government, civilian population, or any segment thereof in furtherance of political or social objectives. U.S. Army Manual definition: terrorism is the calculated use of unlawful violence or threat of unlawful violence to inculcate fear. It is intended to coerce or intimidate government or societies to attain political, religious, or ideological goals. U.S. Army Field Manual number FM 3-0, Chapter 9, 37, 14 June 2001. Here we are going to discuss a type of terrorism, that is state terrorism, that has been defined as acts of terrorism conducted by governments or terrorism carried out directly by or encouraged and funded by an established government of a state, country, or terrorism practiced by a government against its own people or in support of international terrorism. Terrorism is often, though not always, defined in terms of four characteristics. 1. Threat or use of violence. A political objective, the desire to change the status quo. The intention to spread fear by committing spectacular public acts. The intentional targeting of civilians. This last element, targeting innocent civilians, is problematic when one tries to distinguish state terrorism from other forms of state violence. Now we are going to see the acts of French government. Can we categorize the current acts by Emmanuel Macron's government in France as terrorist acts or not? As described earlier, terrorism often, though not always, defined in terms of four characteristics: the threat or use of violence, a political objective, the intention to spread fear, and the intentional targeting of civilians. Now we'll see that actions by current government of France are terrorism against Muslims or not under this pretext. Number 1. Threat or use of violence. Here first element is the threat or use of violence. Let's see if Macron is threatening Muslim population in France, using violence against them or not. A teacher given highest civil award who has shown caricatures of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ previously published by a satirical magazine in a class on freedom of expression. On Friday, the cartoons were projected onto government buildings in France. Head of state commenting Islam as a religion in crisis worldwide. Crackdown on radical Islamism. State supervised closure of masjids. A blizzard of inquiries and searches of houses of Muslim community. Targeted violence against Muslim population in France. Targeted statements by government missionaries against Islam and Islamic ideals. Second, a political objective, the desire to change the status quo. Let's see what agenda does Macron government has. On Friday, the cartoons were projected onto government buildings in France. Earlier this month, Macron described Islam as a religion in crisis worldwide and vowed to present a bill in December to strengthen the law that officially separates church and state in France, even though Muslims believe that any depiction of the Prophet is blasphemous. The intention to spread fear by committing spectacular public acts. Fear will change sides. President Emmanuel Macron is widely quoted as telling his defense council last week the government has announced more than 120 searches of individual houses. The dissolution of association accused of spreading Islamic rhetoric. Fresh pressure on social media companies to police content more efficiently. Number 4. The intentional targeting of civilians. The French government's general crackdown on radical Islamism has had rapid and tough a blizzard of inquiries, closures, plans, and proposals that have sometimes been hard to keep track of. Teacher given highest civil award who has shown caricatures of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ previously published by a satirical magazine in a class on freedom of expression. Projection of cartoons onto government buildings in France. head of state commenting Islam as a religion in crisis, crackdown on radical Islamism, state-supervised closure of masjids, inquiries and searches of houses of Muslim community, targeted violence against Muslim population in France, targeted statements by government missionaries against Islam and Islamic ideals. Here I would like to raise my voice against the hypocrisy of the West and the liberals of Pakistan who are still silent on such a terrorist act by a country against a segment of society that is consisted of approximately one third of the total world population. Also, I want to record my protest against this action by French President Macron and his allies against Muslim beliefs. I condemn the actions by West against Islamic ideologies based on their falsely claimed phobias that are surfaced by Western media. One more thing I want to say is that Muslims believe that any depiction of the Prophet is blasphemous. In a well-developed country, in a well-developed society, the beliefs and ideals are to be protected by the government. This is the duty of the state to protect beliefs and ideals of a segment of society that consists one third of the total world population. Thank you.
At the end, I would request to the listeners to pray from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He bless us with the knowledge and understanding of Islam, all its essentials and fundamentals, the principles of Sharia, and bless us with the knowledge and understanding of the true beliefs of Islam and to follow them and follow the right path to Jannah. Ameen Ya Rabbul Alameen Bijahi Khatamul Anbiya'i wal Mursaleen Sallallahu Ta'ala alayhi wa alihi wa sahabihi wa sallam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.